So we solved by factoring. Now we're going to solve by square roots. We reviewed square roots. We're going to be using that today. So some people will also call this extracting roots. So I wanted you to be familiar with those words too. But we're going to solve by square roots is what we're going to do. Now these equations can only be done with certain ones. There are certain criteria. Just like with factoring, if it's not factorable. So now we're going to learn a specific one if we can do it by square roots. And then we learn quadratic formula that works for everything. So extracting roots mean that the quadratic must be set up with a perfect square on one side. Doesn't even have to be a perfect square. Okay? On one side, which allows you to take the square root of both sides. So it's not a perfect square. It's just there's a squared term on one side. Okay? So we're going to isolate the squared term. So in other words, x squared. Or y squared, but we have to get that square term all by itself. And then we're going to take the square root of both sides of the equation. And then what we have to realize, okay, we're going to get two answers. So just think about it. If I have a squared, I'm going to come up with two answers. If I have a cubed, I'm going to come up with three answers. So depending on what the exponent is, that tells us how many roots we're going to come up with, our answers. So there's positive and negative values. What happens? This is crucial. If we ever have to write the radical in, then you must also write a plus or a minus because you're going to get a positive root and a negative root. And I'll explain this as we go through. Okay, so here we go. Number one. First thing we're going to do is we have to get x squared by itself. So if I want to get x squared by itself, I have multiplication. I'm going to divide both sides by 5. So I get x squared is equal to 1. Now, I'm going to write that smaller. Okay, and I'm going to write it twice. X squared equals 1. That's what we got. Now, I'm going to show you, from now on, I won't do this. I probably won't ever write this again. But I'm going to take the square root. See how I had to put the radical on. If I have to put the radical on, I must also put a plus or a minus. That is crucial. You have to come up with two roots there. Okay, so now I get x equals plus or minus 1. Those are my two answers, plus or minus 1. So if I write it as in a set, it'd be negative 1 and 1. Okay, this is a fine answer for me. Check with your teacher if they want you to do something else. Okay, number 2, we're going to do the same thing. Get the squared term by itself. So divide by negative 9. And we get x squared is equal to whatever that is. Let's divide. 441 divided by 9 gives us 49. And we take the square root of both sides. Look, we put the radical on. See how we put the radical on? We must put the plus or minus on there. So we get k is equal to plus or minus 7. Okay? 31, number 3. Get x squared by itself. Okay, now we still do the same thing. Put the radical on, put the plus or the minus. Now we haven't talked about this yet, but because we haven't gotten into a lot of radicals, but what we would do is this would be plus or minus. See how they're both perfect squares? So rewrite it to be square root of 49 over the square root of 81. We haven't gotten through that, but just take my word for it. Break them apart like that if they're both perfect squares. If not, leave them together. And we're going to get plus or minus 7 over 9. Okay, going to do the same thing here. We're going to get the squared term by itself, but this time we're going to subtract 6. That's 16. Okay, finish that. Go. So hopefully you took the square root of both sides, and when we draw the radical on, if it is not there beforehand, we have to put a plus or a minus. So we get n is equal to plus or minus 4. Okay, let's look at number 5. We have to get the variable by itself. So we're going to divide by negative 3. And we get x squared is equal to 18. We're going to take the square root of both sides. Now, up until now, we've had all perfect squares. Is 18 a perfect square? No, it's not. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to break that down. So that is equal to plus or minus, but we're going to break 18 into perfect square and non-perfect square. And when we do that, we get x is equal to plus or minus square root of 9 is 3 square root 2. Okay? You want to try number 6 on your own, or at least start it. We're going to add 10. We get n squared is equal to 3. We have an n squared. In order to solve, we have to take the square root. If we take the square root, we have to put a plus or a minus. Is 3 a perfect square? No. Are there any perfect squares in it? No. So that is my answer. N is equal to plus or minus the square root of 3. Okay, I think you're getting the idea here. Nothing too complicated. You just have to make sure you go through the steps. So, number 7, try it. Go. Pause. So we have v squared is equal to 98. We subtracted 2. We're going to take the square root of both sides. And we get v is equal to, is 98 a perfect square? No. What's a perfect square that goes into 98? I'm going to try, let's try 4. Nope. 98 divided by 9. Nope. 98 divided by, okay, 4 squared is 16. No, because 4 didn't go into it. So anything with 4 wouldn't go into it. 25, obviously not. 36, let's see. Nope. How about 49? Yes, it goes in twice. Now, this might have been one that it would have been faster if we would have gone over here and broken it down, because we would have seen very quickly it's 49. So it would have been 7 and 7. Okay? But we can break it into perfect square, non-perfect square. So we get r is equal to plus or minus 7 square root 2. And what that plus or minus means, again, is that we have a negative 7 square root 2 and a positive 7 square root 2. Those are our two answers. Okay? You get it? Try the next 3 on your own. Okay, I'm going to leave them right here. Try those next 3 on your own. Pause your video. Try it. Go. So on number 8, we came up with plus or minus 3 square root 7. If you have a different answer, pause yours. Look at my work. Number 9, plus or minus 6 square root 2. Now, you'll see on this one, I broke it down into 9 and 8, and then I had to break down the 8 into 4 and 2. So sometimes you have to break it down more than once. Some of you might have taken out 36 to begin with as your perfect square. I did not. Number 10, I have plus or minus 4 square root 3. Now, this time I remembered that 16 went into 48. But if not, you would have started off with 4 and had 12 and kept breaking down. Okay? So these are your answers. Okay, let's look at your homework. So you have a lot of problems here, front and back. I would check with your teachers to see what your actual assignment would be for these problems. So check with your teacher to see what your assignment will be. Great. Okay, so that is solving quadratics by square roots. If you have any questions, you know where to find us. Thanks.